Everything is awesome. Everything is awesome.
Breaking news as Microsoft announces more additional mass layoffs, the most that they've done in the last 2 years. Now, these layoffs specifically are set to have a massive impact on Washington state as Microsoft has essentially built a small town of office buildings. Now, I'm going to show you guys just how big that is using Google Maps, and I'm also going to show you guys that Americans are starting to lose their jobs at an alarming rate, but probably even more alarming is how young Americans are getting completely bamboozled and have essentially no idea what to do next or even how to keep their jobs to begin with. Now, in addition to those reports, I'm also going to dive into the fact that it appears that Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, is bending his knee to the banking lobbyists as he supports the idea of deregulating the banks even more instead of tightening them and restructuring them from Basel III. You guys, unfortunately, the tyranny continues, but the real question is this: how do I avoid losing my job? And if I lose my job, what do I do next? And welcome back to Real Estate Mindset. You guys already know this video is going to be absolutely bonkers. Happy Thursday. Mitch Vexler, how are you, sir?
Good. NASDAQ is up just a hair. It's up about 28 points. Gold did bounce off. There was a gap price in the chart, and it hit it late last night or early this morning. So it bounced off that. It's up 38. And Microsoft, interestingly enough, is pretty close to its high since May of last year, even with that announcement.
Well, one thing that we know about Wall Street is they love it, Mitch. They love it when these giant corporations lay off and kick their staff to the curb. Microsoft lays off about 3% of its workforce in what one executive calls a day with a lot of tears, but not for Wall Street. Microsoft began laying off about 6,000 workers on Tuesday, nearly 3% of its entire workforce, and its largest job cut in more than 2 years as the company spends heavily on artificial intelligence. So we got more tech layoffs as a result of AI. Hard hit was the tech giant's home state of Washington, where Microsoft informed state officials it was cutting almost 2,000 workers tied to its Redmond headquarters. And when I show you guys how massive this headquarters is, you guys are going to freak out because it's way bigger than I even imagined. Many of them in software engineering and product management roles. Microsoft said the layoffs will be across all levels, teams, and geographics, but the cuts will focus on reducing the number of managers. Notices to employees began going out on Tuesday. The mass layoffs come just weeks after Microsoft reported strong sales and profits that beat Wall Street's expectations. That's crazy. If it beat expectations, then why are you laying off 3% of your staff? I guess expectations doesn't matter, does it? I think many people have this conception of layoffs as something that struggling companies have to do to save themselves, which is one reason for layoffs, but it's not the only reason. Big tech companies have trimmed their workforces as they rearrange their strategies and pull back from more aggressive hiring that they did during the early post-pandemic years. Now, Microsoft has employed about 228,000 full-time employees as of June. Microsoft announced a smaller round of performance-based layoffs this year in January, but the 3% cuts will be the biggest cut since early 2023 when the company cut 10,000 of its workers, or roughly 5% of its entire workforce. Microsoft's chief financial officer says building high-performing teams and increasing our agility by reducing layers with fewer managers. She also said that headcount in March was 2% higher than a year earlier and down slightly compared to the end of last year, which makes completely no sense if they've been doing layoffs for 3 years. The layoffs are hitting all parts of Microsoft businesses, including the video games platform Xbox and the career networking site LinkedIn. Some laid off workers are the executives who made the cuts, took to LinkedIn to talk about them. And this is what they said. This is the first time I've had to lay people off to support business goals that aren't my own. Then whose are they? Wall Street's? I often have trouble separating my beliefs with the system that I participate in and am complicit in. These are people with dreams and rent, and I love them and I want them to be okay, but he doesn't love them enough to have them keep their job. He added, "This is the day with a lot of tears." Microsoft has said that it is spending a whopping $80 billion in the fiscal year that ends in June on building data centers and other infrastructure. It needs to develop its artificial intelligence technology. But when I show you guys how big this area is, it makes no sense that they're making this comment. I think it's just they're saying that to hype people up to get those people to back them. Of the laid off employees in Washington, about 1,500 worked in person at Microsoft offices and 475 worked remotely, according to the notice. Take a look at how big this entire area is. So both sides of the freeway right here are Microsoft buildings, and literally everything you guys see here is a Microsoft building. Now I'm going to zoom out and I want you guys to pay attention to, again, how big this really is. Even down here south, guys, this down here, that's also part of their headquarters. Look at this. I mean, this place is giant. So it's right here where I'm circling, okay? That's how big this Microsoft Center is. And I want you guys to notice what's surrounding these massive commercial buildings. Look at this. Okay. The only thing that's surrounding this are residential neighborhoods. Look at that. All of these residential neighborhoods, the housing market and the economy is going to be absolutely smoked as a result of these layoffs. And again, when I zoom in here, I mean, look at this. There's apartments right next to it. Look at these apartments. These look like brand new apartments right here. Look at these, all these apartments, brand new. And I'm going to tell you guys, those apartments more than likely were made because Microsoft was coming into town. And now that they're leaving, I wonder how devastating it's really going to be on that local community. Before I ask Mitch our first question, I want to look at a TikTok video of someone that just got fired, because I want you guys to remember how scary and how uncomfortable being fired really is. And this person is in their 30s. And I want you to ask yourself, is this person doing the right things immediately after being fired?
I have tried to push the record button for like 10 minutes and I can't seem to get this out. I am a 36-year-old nurse. I live in Southeast Missouri, and up until this morning, I had a job. And my boss called and fired me on my day off. He couldn't give me a reason. He said that I did a great job at work. But instead of cowering and hiding, I thought that I would make myself vulnerable and put this on TikTok to see if anyone else has ever been fired. I mean, I know there are people that have been fired in their 30s, but how did you feel? I feel right now very disposable. I think I'm a very proud person. I'm embarrassed right now. I managed to file for unemployment benefits in hopes of not missing too much of a paycheck. But wow.
You guys, getting laid off not only affects the person mentally, there's huge mental impacts. I know that because it happened to me. This destroys citizens, it destroys their families, and it destroys local communities. This is a really big deal. And so, Mitch, my question for you is, what impacts do these mass layoffs have on these local communities, the hyper-local impact of mass layoffs? And then can you also go into the mental health of everyday Americans that are laid off and what that challenge is like?
So as we speak, this particular feed is about 15 minutes behind, but as we speak, Microsoft is up $30.93, which as of that article coming out, that's up 7.31%. So mass layoffs, stock is up 7.31%. The price to earnings ratio on Microsoft is 34.9. The market cap is 3.34 trillion. The key words inside of what Travis read, we are reducing layers of managers. Well, anybody on the corporate world who hears that must ask one question. Why did you have layers of managers to begin with? Which idiot set that up? And that leads to the issue of these people getting laid off and it being a lot of people. And then what happens, A, to those people, and then B, to the local economy. Well, clearly it's devastating for the local economy because those jobs more than likely won't get replaced. She mentioned a word that she was embarrassed. There's zero. When you get laid off, there is zero to be embarrassed about. It's more an issue of grieving that you've lost something. You've lost your job. It's like losing a loved one. This is all this lady's ever done. So she just hasn't recognized that this is the process of grieving. I would want to point out, though, given where we are on the economy, and given the fact that people are not taught through school to understand you have a job, but that job is fleeting. Nothing is permanent. So people are set up to be put in a position, as she said, to be embarrassed or to be put in a position to end up having to grieve over the loss of that job. That should never be the case. If somebody has skills and you develop those skills throughout life, you don't become dependent on, well, this is all I did, because it's a fleeting process. People who go to vocational schools generally can bounce back pretty quick because they're handy with their mind, they're handy with their hands, they've got skills. People who get locked into a position, well, I was a banker, okay, big deal. You know, the fact that you're a banker doesn't mean who you are as a person or what you did. You actually have less skills than a person who's got vocational skills. Different training, different methods. The point is, if you go to work for a big company, you're a target. You may be there, you may not be there, but you cannot put yourself and should not put yourself in the position, well, this is my life and I'm going to dedicate my life and nothing's ever going to happen to me because these managers are going to look after me. These managers, just as you heard, have screwed up because they didn't even know why they had a job. Reducing layers of managers. That little sentence says it all.
Mitch, let's move on to our second segment. And this second segment, I am not happy about. U.S. Post to dial back bank rules imposed in wake of 2008 crisis. And when I read that headline, I'm like, there's no way. There's no way, because they've barely even implemented any tightening from 2008. If anything, non-banks have even more flexibility. This article is not a good one, guys, I'm afraid. U.S. authorities are preparing to announce one of the biggest cuts in bank capital requirements for more than a decade, marking the latest sign of the deregulation agenda of the Trump administration. And again, they haven't even initiated Basel III. So the fact that they're talking like this, my heart sunk, guys. Regulators are in the next few months posed to reduce the supplementary leverage ratio, according to several people familiar with the matter, which means they don't have to keep as much as of our money at the bank. They can take our deposit, they can take our money and recklessly invest it in high-risk investments. The rule requires big banks to have a preset amount of high-quality capital against their total leverage. But remember, that's our money, guys. Don't ever forget that. It's not their money. They're leveraging our money and they're getting filthy rich. It's a wealth transfer. They're wealth transferring with our money and the Federal Reserve, central appraisal districts. This stuff is insane, which includes assets such as loans and off-balance sheet exposures such as derivatives. It was established in 2014 as part of the sweeping reforms in the wake of the 2008 and 2009 financial crisis, but Basel III has not been implemented. So I don't know what they're talking about. Bank lobbyists have been campaigning against the rule for years, saying it punishes lenders for holding even low-risk assets such as U.S. Treasuries, hinders their ability to facilitate trading in the $29 trillion government debt market, and weakens their ability to extend credit. Do you guys hear what they're saying? They're saying, you're penalizing us if we have to keep our depositors' money. Not even all of it, not even close to all of it, but just a little bit more. Penalizing banks for holding low-risk assets like treasuries undermines their ability to support market liquidity during times of stress when it is most needed. Bank Policy Institute lobby groups are saying regulators should act now rather than waiting for the next event. The next event has already happened. Look at the lack of our income growth. Look at the credit card debt. Look at all of these things. Critics, however, say it is a worrying time to cut bank capital requirements, yes, given the recent market volatility and policy upheaval under the administration of President Donald Trump. Given the state of the world, there are all kinds of risks out there, including for U.S. banks, the role of the dollar, and the direction of the economy. It doesn't sound like the right time to relax capital standards at all. I agree with that. It would also encourage banks to begin taking a bigger role in trading treasuries after the industry ceded ground to high-frequency traders and hedge funds as a result of rules put in place after the financial crisis. A lot of good those rules did. Leading U.S. policymakers have expressed support for easing the SLR rule. The U.S. Treasury Secretary said last week that such reforms was a high priority for the main banking regulators, the Federal Reserve, the Office of Comptroller, and the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. But he cited the Federal Reserve, Mitch. He cited the Federal Reserve. Bank lobbyists hope the U.S. brings its leverage ratio requirements in line with international standards. I don't. Another option considered by regulators is to exclude low-risk assets such as treasuries and central bank deposits from the leverage ratio calculation. But remember, the number 2, number 3, and number 4 biggest bank failures in our history was actually a result of these low-risk assets. Number 2, number 3, and number 4 biggest bank failures. Morgan Stanley analysts estimated recently that only State Street was generally constrained by the SLR. Wow, Morgan Stanley, thank you for being honest. Meaning, you guys, it's not mom and pop, it's the lenders. I want to play a video before going to Mitch of what's called Operation Twist that happened back in 2012. And I want you guys to know that they printed billions and billions of dollars. And of that money, of that billions of dollars that they printed in 2012, not only did we skip a recession, a lot of that money, billions of those dollars, of those taxpayer dollars, went into the pockets of the CEOs of those banks. How is that fair? How can CEOs take billions of dollars into their personal pockets from U.S. taxpayers? Remember our past. Take a listen to this video.
Fed Chief Ben Bernanke said the central bank will continue its bond buying program dubbed Operation Twist. The $267 billion program is designed to keep interest rates at record lows, sparking more borrowing, spending, and growth. Bernanke said the Fed is prepared to take further steps if the economy gets worse. The world's largest producer of consumer products is expecting a slowdown in business. Procter & Gamble, which makes everything from Tide detergent to Duracell batteries, predicts sales will sink in the coming months. And more major companies are taking down the help wanted sign. In a new survey, 64% of CEOs said they do not plan to hire new workers over the next 6 months, and 20% said they expect to cut back their workforce. Both numbers are up from a survey done in the spring. Burger King is back on the New York Stock Exchange. BK's stock was pulled in 2010 when the fast food giant was bought and taken private. But part of the burger chain was recently sold and is now being traded publicly once again.
That was from 2012. So in essence, we should have gone into recession, at least in my opinion, we should have gone into recession in 2012. But look at this. This is the assets held, okay, by the Federal Reserve. So here it is right here. They go from 2.8 trillion in assets all the way up to about 4.3 trillion. Do y'all see the problem here? Look at that. For 2 years, look at this. They're artificially stimulating the economy instead of allowing the market to work itself out. They screwed us, Mitch. I don't like that. I don't like that at all. Won't deregulation of these banks, like they're proposing, like they're saying is a high priority, won't that just cause the wealth transfer to speed up? And won't that just create a bigger bubble?
No, it'll cause a greater depression. So let's back up just for a minute so I can say a handful of things. First of all, in 2012, Operation Twist, I called it Operation Twisted. You've got to be sick and perverted in order to do it, and that's what they have done. But we're about to see how that plays out right now. The idea of dialing back the rules on the banks is what has caused the inflation where we are today. They have, give or take, 600 trillion worth of off-balance sheet derivatives that nobody, including Scott Bessent himself, has a clue what they are, where they are, what the interplay is between the banks, because our 23,000 employees at the Federal Reserve choose not to track it. Yet they do choose to accept some of these derivatives as collateral in exchange for US treasuries. Problem is, they're accepted at face value, not mark to market. Again, the Treasury, the Federal Reserve have no clue in the reverse repo what the real value is of those underlying derivatives. So the derivatives, that 600 trillion, the best way to think of them, they are financial weapons of mass destruction. They will end up destroying the US economy. Now, I want to make a point. The thesis and fact that I did made the same point. The economy is mom and pop. The idea that the economy should be held hostage by virtue of 600 trillion worth of off-balance sheet debt, or held hostage by, give or take, 5.1 trillion of local school district fraudulent bond debt. Either way, these are financial weapons being used against mom and pop. It's being used against the economy. If you simply said, we aren't going to do anything with these banks in terms of what you were just talking about a minute ago, Travis, with regard to bailing them out, and you say, we're going to get rid of these off-balance sheet derivatives and make them well-known so that we can go counterparty to third party to originator, put them in a room and simply say, this is going to vanquish. We're not going to allow you to do this anymore. If your bank goes bankrupt, so be it. That is the only way to fix this problem with regard to the debt as large as it has become. So President Trump right now is touring the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and he's got, give or take, roughly 1.4 trillion in commitments to invest in the United States. Okay, let's put this in perspective. That's great. It's wonderful. Here's the problem. That's 1.4 trillion coming in from that country into US investments. Fantastic. Here's the problem. You've got $600 trillion worth of global credit derivatives, credit loan obligations, cross-counter bank guarantees. Globally, this stuff is floating around. Nobody knows what it is, where it is, how bad it is. And that's over and above, okay? Over and above what we know, give or take, to short of 200 trillion that the US is responsible for, never mind the banks. So you've got 37 trillion worth of US national debt. You've got unfunded liabilities. The combination is just short of 200 trillion, give or take. But when you add on the derivatives and think that that's going to be backstopped, and anybody that thinks that that's going to be backstopped on the back of mom and pop is delusional. This stuff must be wiped out, or everything that President Trump is working on and being successful with isn't going to matter. So can you imagine, instead of doing, or like he did in Qatar and the UAE, you're having all these meetings, you have a series of meetings with all these people that are responsible for these derivatives, this garbage, and say, we're going to get rid of it and we're going to peel it back. We're going to peel the layer back, and one by one, whoever the participants are, you're not doing it anymore. So the idea of, well, we're just going to let the banks do whatever they want. We're going to let them change their tier one capital. We're going to let them change the camel ratings, which is what they're required to do in law, for something that clearly hasn't worked in the past and isn't going to work now due to the derivatives that they've got. In other words, Mr. Bessent, you're not paying attention, bud. You got a problem here. And you cannot do something when you do not know what the underlying facts are. Nobody does. That's your job. You're the guy in charge. And if you can't do it, then get Elon Musk with AI, because this is exactly what I said in the thesis and fact. It takes AI to determine and understand where all these debts really are and who is responsible. They can be peeled back. Doesn't mean that mom and pop have to pay for any of it. The problem is it exists. It must be wiped out so that the books are clean. When you've got that, then everything that President Trump is doing around the globe and bringing more money in, it's all great. But it is the debt that is the pink elephant dancing in the room that nobody wants to talk about. These derivatives are weapons of financial mass destruction, period.
I mean, these pink elephants are dancing on the backs of mom and pop, unfortunately. And the only thing that's really being peeled away is our balance sheets. And a lot of people still are like, hey, yeah, it's pretty expensive. Yeah, the inflation's bad, but they're not finishing that thought process, right? They're not saying, well, why is this happening? Where's the money going? And I thought we just passed a whole bunch of bonds. They're asking for more. And what impact does passing bonds have on me? And what impact does bailing banks out have on my children? Well, I see that now. I see that very clearly. It makes life a lot more difficult to live. It makes it so difficult to live, as you guys are about to see, that some grown adults still have their parents paying for their cell phone. Look at this video, guys, and then after the video, I'm going to show you some data on why the cost of living is so out of control.
To live out here, like genuinely, how do you afford it? My husband and I just got married, so we're in the process of like switching everything over and getting our own stuff. And we literally can't afford it, like simply. We just got a quote for our car insurance and it's $220 a month for the cheapest thing that we could find, on top of our student loans, our rent, our groceries, our electricity, all the other bills. The next thing that we have to do is get new phone bills because, we're married and we got to get off our parents. We might be getting flip phones. Like I literally don't, how are we going to afford it? We can't afford We cannot afford all this stuff. Like we both have full-time jobs. We can't, how are y'all affording to live? We're trying to find side hustles. We have Instacart and DoorDash. Like, I don't know what else to do. I can't get a second full-time job. Like, I don't have time for that. I'm very overwhelmed. Adulting sucks. Adulting is a scam. You work until you die. You still can't afford to live. Somebody needs to come up with a better system.
She's right about a few things. We definitely need a better system, and adulting is kind of a scam, but I want you guys to understand what she just said. 2 part-time jobs, right? So her husband and her have a part-time job, which means that household is a 4-job household, and they're struggling to pay their own cell phone bills. They're literally, both of them, their parents are paying their cell phone bills. Comment below if you can. Are your parents paying your cell phone bill right now? Are they? Comment below. Let us know. Maybe it's normal. I don't know. Either way, let me show you guys some data on why things are so out of control. The first one is this little chart you guys see here. This is the U.S. national debt over the last 100 years. And you guys can see, I mean, they're literally spending money way worse than that lady that you just watched. If we were to compare how the government is spending compared to the video that we just watched, she's a saint. I mean, she's literally Dave Ramsey. No debt, right? Comparatively, she's Dave Ramsey when we compare this right here. It's absolutely astonishing. And that's not all. When we take the government's own information and we add the national debt up here on the left, the 36 trillion, plus the unfunded debt, which is right here, 103 trillion. When we divide the U.S. income taxpayers into those two numbers, that means that each of us is in over $1.24 million in federal debt. Is that absolutely crazy? Here's the thing, Mitch. I want to get to the root of the issues here. A lot of young adults don't understand what's going on. One way to keep your job is to become an unreplaceable asset, good mentality, and being a better worker than anyone else. Obviously, hedging, some things you can do to hedge is resume, and don't put things on social media that you don't want a future employer that's interviewing you to see. So those are some really important things that just seem like common sense, but it's not common sense anymore. So Mitch, can you articulate and talk to the young Americans now and these children on how they can hedge themselves to not, keyword, not get laid off in the near future? What can these young adults do?
Education is everything. And the problem with the US debt clock, as horrific as it is, and I think everybody should go look at it, you have to realize that it doesn't include Freddie Mac, Fannie Mae. Give or take, those debts are about 5.9 trillion. It doesn't include the outstanding fraudulent school district bond debt. Give or take across the United States, that's roughly 5.1 trillion. It doesn't include the derivatives that I just spoke about. And allegedly that's around 600 trillion. So when you put all this in perspective and you have the education and you can articulate what I just said and think about it, even if you're a young person and you realize, well, I can see usdebtclock.org, I can see what this is. How can this be paid off? Well, in essence, you as a younger person, or anybody for that matter, must recognize what these debts are and that they cannot be paid off. Therefore, it behooves all citizens to get a hold of their politicians and say, this has to go. This system will implode. That is what the math shows, because not a single person that is watching these videos, or these very, very, very few, could actually write a check for 1.2 million, and that doesn't include the derivatives, Freddie Mac, the fraudulent school district bond debt, doesn't include any of that. That's a minimum number. You can't do it. And then when you think about it, the 1.2 million that you would owe right now today, well, in 7 years, that's double up. Rule of 72, compound cumulative effect. That's in the First Amendment to the criminal complaint that I wrote to the DOJ. We laid out all that math. So education for everybody is truly the key to understanding it, being able to articulate it, file the criminal complaints where applicable. But that is what has to be done. You can't hide in the cave and say, well, I just don't know, I don't understand. It's not that difficult. usdebtclock.org, that tells you quite a story.
Now, I want to conclude this video by giving you guys a quick update. I did a video yesterday where I completed the criminal complaint myself, and I walked that bad boy into the DA's office. YouTube absolutely buried that video. But what I wanted you guys to see is how many people watched that video and within 24 hours downloaded the criminal complaint themselves to turn it into the DA. Go to realestatemindset.org. Okay, so realestatemindset.org. And I have 3 criminal complaints right here. This is a short, simple version criminal complaint. Now in 24 hours, this is so cool, you guys. You guys are just big a part of this as us. In 24 hours, we had 11 short version criminal complaints. We had 5 specific to Montgomery County. Great job if you're in Montgomery County. I'm so proud of you guys. And listen to this. We had 6 people download the Harris County ISD bond cap criminal complaint. I wanted to give you guys a special shout out. Great job. Keep pushing. Don't forget, get it notarized. Have 2 copies. Mail 1 copy into the Department of Justice, Pamela Bondi, and then send the other copy. And I walked it in. I got shut down, unfortunately, and I had to end up mailing it in. But regardless, walk it into the DA and let's hold these people accountable together, because the only way things are going to change is if you and I work together. Now, other than that, guys, if you guys are out there just living your life, you guys already know. We wish you luck and we hope you win.